Hey guys, what's up? John here from Fly8MikeAlpha.com, and today we're looking at the VOR approach to runway 6 in Ann Arbor. And the question is not how do you shoot this approach, not how do you fly it, but the question is how accurate is it really, and how far off course can you get before you run into something? Now let's go ahead and talk about the one thing that's going to keep you safe and stop you from running into these buildings and towers out here on the left during this approach. So obviously on a VOR approach here, we're using our VOR. We know that's not the most accurate navigational instrument in our airplane exactly, especially compared to GPS if you have like a WASP GPS. Also note, final approach course inbound is 035, not exactly aligned up with the runway. So even if you do pop out of the clouds and see the runway, you'll be making a slight right-hand turn to get to the runway and get lined up there. The final approach course is actually bringing you towards the VOR, which it has to, but it's not exactly lined up with the runway. So right from the get-go, this isn't exactly perfect. Also notice there's no DME required or radar required to shoot this approach. So you could legally shoot this with literally just one single VOR receiver in your airplane. Easier if you had two, so you can actually identify the final approach course and identify your final approach fix hearts using the 294 radial off the Carlton VOR. So let's say we have two standard VOR receivers in our airplane to do this approach. So as we're coming down the final approach course, we're supposed to identify hearts by the cross radial with Carlton and the radial off of Salem, the 215 radial, our final approach course radial. So let's say we're flying in, and earlier that day we did a VOR check. We did an airborne check, and our VOR was within plus or minus 6 degrees, so 6 degrees off. So it's legal to fly with, legal to shoot this approach, but well, it's a little bit off. Let's say as we're flying this approach too, that you twist the OBS setting. Do you really ever twist it to the exact radial? Do you ever really twist it to 215? Or maybe it's 216 or 214. Maybe it's a little off. Because are your eyes really that good? And is the instrument and the gearing in it really that precise to get dialed in right to the 215 radial? Probably not. But that's okay. It's seemingly inconsequential, right? And the plus or minus 6 degrees is seemingly inconsequential as well. It's well within legal limits. How about you're flying this approach and it's a little cold outside? Maybe it's like 0 or maybe even negative 10 Celsius. So maybe only 15 degrees Fahrenheit outside. It's wintertime. It's cold. Everything's white, snowy, and low IFR. Okay, so it's 500 overcast in Ann Arbor. Again, seemingly inconsequential. Maybe 2 miles viz and 500 overcast, 500 to 600 feet overcast. Maybe you'll get in on the approach. You can see that brings you down to 529 feet over the ground. And the cold weather, well, it's cold, right? The airplane gets better performance, so what? Doesn't seem like that big a deal. But we know from checking our cold weather correction table that when it's negative 10 degrees centigrade outside and we're 500 to 600 feet above airport elevation, then our altimeter is going to be about 60 feet off. It's going to be indicating 60 feet higher than we really are. So if we level off at those mins, we're going to be 60 feet lower than we want to be. And to err on the side of caution, you could say somewhere between 60 and 90 feet, depending on the temperature. Also, when you took off, you checked your altimeter relative to field elevation, and it was within 75 feet. So you're only accurate to within plus minus 75 feet because you set the local altimeter setting and maybe it was showing, 50 feet higher or something. So at this point, our altimeter itself is 100 feet off, we could say, conservatively. It could be even worse. Our VOR is about 6 degrees off. It's cold, snowy, and 2 miles viz with about a 500 to 600 foot overcast. All not really terrible things, all seemingly inconsequential until they all kind of stack up together. So if the VOR really was 6 degrees off, or even worse, how far off course would you be when you're on the final approach course and the CDI needle is centered? Well, if you're right here at Hearts, about 20 miles from Salem, we know that being 60 miles from the VOR, 60 nautical miles, and being 1 degree off is 1 nautical mile off course. We also know that being 20 miles from the VOR, being 1 degree off would be 0.3 nautical miles off course. So if you're 6 degrees off, you'd be 2 nautical miles off course. Then, how about with the Carlton VOR? You're going to identify this, and again, you're going to wind up 2 miles off course. So now all of a sudden, Hearts is somewhere over here. And then you fly that 035 final approach course inbound from that mysterious final approach fix you determined to be over here, even though it's not. But again, you've done everything legal up to this point. So you start your descent on down to 529 feet above field elevation, 1360 on the altimeter, and really you're cruising along at 1260 or 1200 feet at this point. And you level off, and you obey the 1360 MDA, really you're at 1200 feet, you just don't know it, and you're cruising along and you decide, okay, well, at 60 knots, I asked ATC, they said my ground speed was 60 knots, and based on the winds aloft and my indicated airspeed, I believe I'm doing about 60 knots. And I identified hearts to be over here. I started my timer. 5 minutes from then, I should go ahead and start a climb to 3,000 feet and proceed direct to Salem VOR. Okay, that's fine. But if you really wait till 5 minutes later, you won't be here at the runway threshold. You'll be 2 miles past it, right where all this stuff is. And now you're cruising over these towers and these buildings at, about 53 feet to spare, maybe 13 feet to spare. That seems safe, right? Nothing could possibly ever go wrong. You would never be 13 feet below your MDA of 1360 indicated, would you? You're more precise than that, sure. So we can see that all these things, a cold weather day, an altimeter that's not perfectly accurate, a VOR receiver that's not perfectly accurate, no GPS on board the airplane, or no way to back up this approach and make it more precise and tell that something's off. No radar identifiable points from ATC. They're not radar fixes out here, so they can't necessarily identify them to you. And the fact that the final approach fix is just identified from another VOR, which is about 20 nautical miles away, we can tell by looking at the load chart. All those things really combine together to make what we in the aviation industry refer to as an NTSB accident report, because you're probably going to hit something out here. That's why we like to use the saying, stack the deck in your favor. Do everything you possibly can to make things in your favor, so when things do start going wrong, you have a little bit of room for error, a little bit of margin of error stacked up for you. When you start to notice things going wrong, like your altimeter is not perfectly accurate, the VOR is not perfectly accurate, it's a little cold outside, that'd be a great day not to do a VOR approach down to minimums. Maybe wait till the weather's a little better, or go somewhere else with an ILS approach. And also, no matter what you do, you definitely want to be using a PDP or a VDP, because that's probably your one saving grace, the one thing that's going to stop you from hitting these towers, is that PDP. Now, with no VDP charted, you have to use a PDP, just as we talked about in the last lesson on our IFR course, the IFR tips, tricks, and survival lesson, how to factor in, how to calculate that PDP, your planned descent point. And that really is the one thing that's going to stop you from getting too far past the runway and executing your missed approach too late before you run into towers or trees or buildings. If you want to learn more about this, go ahead and check out the online course at flyatmikealpha.com. The Instrument Pilot Ground School is an awesome way to bring you from zero to hero, knowing nothing, all the way to being ready to go for your instrument pilot check ride, all of the book knowledge you need, plus real-world practical knowledge as we take you through all sorts of scenarios on a simulated cross-country across the country from Florida all the way to California, and you make the decisions, you progress through the course, taking that airplane all the way across the country, learning about different airports, different airspace, different procedures all along the way. Be sure to check it out online at flyatmikealpha.com along with all the other awesome, helpful online resources and courses there. And as always, guys, if you can't fly every day, then flyatmikealpha.com. We'll see you all next time.